This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My next novel, Only the Dead, hits shelves this spring and is available for pre-order now. Go to officialjackcarr.com, click on Only the Dead for a sneak peek. My guest today, former CIA case officer, Doug Patteson. Fascinating guy. Really enjoyed talking to him. And he does some stuff in the entertainment industry these days. So without further ado, let's get after it. Doug Patteson. Doug, what's up, man?
How you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
I'm so glad we're finally doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
And I gotta tell you, are you in New Hampshire or Texas? Where are you right now?
So I'm in New Hampshire right. Well, I live in New Hampshire right now. I'm currently in Virginia for the week,
Nice.
with some family stuff going on. But and from Texas, hence the Texas Spy Dad name. Yeah.
Got it. Oh man, well, this is really my favorite part about doing a podcast. Is that I get to sit down and not have a computer open in front of me, not have emails coming in, not have text messages coming in. And most of the time people leave me alone out here in the podcast studio. But there are very few times when you can just sit down for like an hour and a bit and just talk to somebody these days. Even if you're at lunch with somebody, one of the two most likely is going to be going to that phone, for
exactly. Yeah.
a
It's
buzz.
tough to unplug and feels good when you do.
Yeah. And see, it sounds weird saying unplug because obviously we're on audio and video in separate states, but those interruptions is what I mean. Those constant interruptions from the electronic devices. But man, this is awesome. Let's go and start at probably the road to the CIA. I mean,
Sure.
So many people are interested in that, me included, especially in the time that you went in, because your influences probably were popular culture,
Right.
I'm guessing, that informed what you knew about the CIA. But what was that path into the CIA and going to the farm and becoming a case officer?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. So like many folks in my generation, we had parents who were kind of the Vietnam generation and grandparents who were the World War II and Korea generation. And, so I grew up listening to those stories of service from them. And then this phenomenal movie came out called Top Gun. Right. And like so many of us, that got us thinking about how we might serve. And my grandfather had been a fighter pilot in World War II. He flew P-47s over Europe and had talked a lot about that with me, as I was growing up. So Top Gun, grandfather made me start looking at flying. And so I went and talked to the Marines about wanting to be a Marine Corps fighter pilot. And the Marines would have got me, except for the contract you had to sign to get into flight school. And I couldn't envision guaranteeing I would do anything for a solid 6 or 7 years, whatever the contract term was after flight school. And so it just got me pulled back a little bit and thinking about other ways to serve. And the CIA was recruiting on campus. And I thought that's kind of odd. And I'd grown up reading, the Fleming books, and I'd grown up reading Len Dayton, and the spy games or set match, et cetera, and all of these novels. So I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. I like languages. I want to be overseas. Let me go talk to the recruiter. And the recruiter was there recruiting primarily for overt roles and looking for engineers and analysts and folks like that. And I was not performing super well in college.
Where were you at school?
I was at the University of Texas.
Okay.
So
you're having a good time out there?
Yeah, I was having a great time in college, and at least some part of college is sort of focused on that. I may have had my priorities opposite of what they should have been, but I was holding my own. But the recruiter looked at me and he's looking at this less than stellar resume and said, "Yeah, I need analysts, I need engineers, I need scientists." He goes, "The only thing you might be set up for would be being a case officer." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He goes, "Well, they're the guys that spend all their time overseas, meeting bad guys, recruiting sources, running spies." He goes,
hadn't you read Clancy yet at this point? I mean,
Yeah.
This is like early 90s, right?
This was late 80s.
Late 80s. So there's a couple Clancy books out. There's like 4, maybe even 5. What, you hadn't read those yet?
I had read some of them, but remember, Jack Ryan was an analyst.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my exposure to the case officer world was small, but and some of the terminology was stuff that I was still processing. But as I listened to him, I said, yeah, that's the only thing I'd want to do. Like I don't want to be stuck at headquarters in a cubicle, with 1,000 other people that are wearing tennis shoes on the subway because their feet hurt, sort of thing. And he said, well, I'm not sure you'll make it through this process, but I'll kick it off. And he put my resume in the hopper, and that just started that long series of interviews and psych exams and polygraphs, that goes through. And it's a lot longer now. It's pretty fast back then, but it was probably 7 months before I got the call that said, hey, come on over.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's there's another program, I won't say the name of it just in case it's sensitive or something like that, where they take you and if you have a background that they want, and they kind of fast track it a little bit. And that's the one that I went through. So you still do your lifestyle poly, you still do your psych eval, you still do your medical course like that, but it takes a couple of those things that you have to do kind of out of the process, just really speeds it up a tiny bit. So that was interesting to go through. So yours was the longer one, I'm guessing, and you went through that.
It was, and I was 21 or 22 years old. I didn't have tremendous amount of life experience out there. Was bringing language skills and people skills with me.
What was your language?
My language then was Spanish.
Yeah.
And I had fluency in Spanish, but what that really showed them was that I had the ability to learn other languages
aptitude.
As well.
Yeah, aptitude they're looking for.
Exactly.
And so is this your senior year, or is this like junior year where you're going to like a job fair or something like that? How do you even find out that they're doing it? They have like a flyer as you're going by, some sort of a board on campus or something?
It's exactly right. In fact, it's a funny aspect of the story because you had to sign up for interviews in a career center, and everybody signed up on pieces of paper that were hanging on the wall for your interview slots. And so they said to me, now this job path you're pursuing is a covert path. And this list of job interviews here is an overt piece of paper that says you've applied for a job in the CIA. So we're going to have to reject you. And you're going to get a letter, which I still have today, which is that rejection letter. And then, a few months later, and it's always a little curious to me, I have this letter from them on letterhead with my job offer on it.
That's cool.
So both delivered to the same address. So it's kind of a silly, little shell game to work through. But yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I have my acceptance letter still, but it comes from, because of the path that I was on, it comes from a different corporation type thing. It's kind of cool. I have the packet and everything upstairs, and it was interesting to go through that process. I ended up staying in the military instead, and finished out there, but it was an interesting process to go through. I loved my experience working with the agency downrange, learned a lot. It forms if people have read the novels, they know that there's a touch point with the CIA that really is foundational to a lot of the characters in my books.
We always had a great time working with team guys as well, and there's a close relationship between the two organizations. And I was, one of the more fun aspects of training I got to do was I got to go to gun sight with a bunch of team guys.
Nice.
And we had some good bonding during that training. And, few ranges that had native populations of rabbits had a few less rabbits too after those.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great spot to go out and train. So you do this, you're going through this process, and do you have a backup, or do you, as you're going through this process, are you putting all your eggs in that basket, really wanting it? Or is it kind of like, hey, if I get accepted, I get accepted. Otherwise I'm going to go, do whatever else.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I graduated mid-year senior year. So I actually had to take a job. I took a job in a sales management training pipeline for a manufacturing company that was international in nature, because I knew I had this strong international bent that I wanted to pursue anyway. And so I took that job, and I was in it about 3 months when I got the offer from the organization. I said to them, hey guys, I got this other thing that I'd actually started the process for a while ago that's come through, and it's going to involve me serving my nation in various capacities. And they said, go for it. We're always here if that changes.
It almost sounds like a front company or a shell company, the way you describe it, Universal Exports.
Yep.
Yeah.
It does sound awful similar to that. Yeah. And it's interesting what you can do with those sorts of things.
Exactly. So what's your path then? You get on a plane, fly out to the East Coast, show up at the farm, like as a brand new kind of recruit type deal, or?
I packed up a car and drove across the U.S. from Texas to Virginia. I had met somebody who was going through the same recruitment pipeline. And, they tell you, don't talk to any of the recruits, don't exchange any meaningful information. Mm. And of course, as I think anybody that's wired to become a case officer does, you find those boundaries and immediately begin to figure out how you can push them to maximize your benefit. And so you could tell who was probably going to make it through this program or not. So I actually found my roommate who I was going to live with as he was going through the same interview pipeline. And we both were confident enough eventually that we were going to make it through the process that we exchanged info and said, hey, if we do this, let's be roommates. And so we moved in together and began that training pipeline initially in Northern Virginia and in an outbuilding before ultimately traveling to the farm for multiple training iterations.
Nice. So they kind of take you up, give you like your introductory briefs and that sort of thing, kind of more up north, and then you go down to the farm and get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, history of the organization, how it functions, and its role overall in the IC, and those sorts of things, and the various roles within the agency. Because at that point in time, understanding what all the different jobs were and what did it do was a significantly more difficult exercise to explore than it is today. Right. And so you spent, a few weeks doing that before going down to a course that they don't run anymore, but it was called SOTC at the time. And it was the Special Operations Tradecraft course, or as we called it, Outward Bound with Guns.
Yeah. Nice. Did they put you in different different parts of the CIA before you went down to the farm? Like, hey, here's what the analysts do, spend 3 days there. Here's what these guys do, spend 3 days here, like that sort of a thing, or a week here, a week there as an intro?
They did that. It all depends. So there were rolling start dates, and then they would accumulate enough candidates into a class, and then that class would begin kind of the formal thing. So depending upon where you rolled in on, they would have filler stuff like that, and then you would have a series of formal functional assignments where for I believe at the time it was 3 months you'd rotate through some of those roles, and you were required to rotate through roles that were not going to be core to what you were doing, so that you would gain an appreciation for that. Before and some it was before the farm, some it was after the farm, and all of that was before ultimately going to the farm for the formal case officer core course, the trade course.
Nice. Is it all kind of rolled in together now? Like, do they go down there and do the driving and do some basic weapons FAM stuff and do all that sort of thing as part of that case officer training now?
Yeah, a lot of that weapons FAM stuff has gone away unless you're going to serve in a war zone specifically, or in a high threat environment. They
took the fun out of it. Like budget cuts. You guys having some problems over there with budgets? I know it's pretty small. Yeah.
It did seem silly to send somebody through weapons training when they were going to spend most of their time in European capitals.
Well, you never know. It's fun though. It's fun, and it's the bonding part of it. It's like that shared experience that you have with somebody that went through 5 years before you, 10 years before you. Like, you all had this shared kind of experience. I think there's a lot of value in doing those things, even if you're probably not going to use them later on. But knowing that, hey, I went through the same thing that so-and-so working at headquarters, or so-and-so working in Nairobi or whatever, like we shared that experience together. So 100%. No matter where you're coming from around the country, or what your background is, if you were in a lawyer, or if you were in the military, or if you were just out of college, now you have a shared experience, So I think there's some value
and
there.
Shared love and or hatred for some of the same instructors.
And right? You had some old school instructors. So you're going through, so what year are you going through the farm now?
So that was 91.
91. So you're having some old school guys. You're having some people that worked in the 80s, in the 70s, probably in the 60s even. Like that's
earlier.
Yeah, earlier.
No, we would have some guys that were right on the, entering in 1948, 49, 50 timeframe that they were annuitants and helping out. Just had, and in fact, one of our instructors in the Special Operations Tradecraft course just passed away
I saw
today.
That.
Today or yesterday, Dutch.
I saw that.
Yeah, Dutch just passed, and he was a hugely
86
impactful.
Years old, I think, right? Is that what he was?
Yeah.
Wow. And he was like 36 with the agency, and he was born overseas, and then he went to U.S. Army Special Forces eventually, and then into the agency for all those years. I mean, my goodness. Wow.
And he was awe-inspiring to us as we entered and looked at him and saw saw his, war wounds and saw the man he'd become and his heart for this nation that had adopted him and taken him in. It was incredibly impactful. And my mentor in the agency was a gentleman named Jim Dunn, and he served over the course of 6 different decades, starting in the 50s, ultimately into the 2010s, as either a contractor or a career employee, teaching and sharing his knowledge and experience with others. And so you had some of those long-term people that just kind of poured themselves into you.
Yeah. That's incredible. I mean, guys from the inception of the agency up to today. And if they weren't there in maybe 1947, 48, they certainly knew people who were, if they were coming in the early 50s or mid 50s or early 60s. Right. I mean, what an incredible time. And it's interesting
too, talking to guys that from other organizations like your own or CAG, et cetera, who all kind of had some of those overlaps, and we'll share stories about, hey, did you stay in XYZ barracks when you were there? And they're like, oh yeah, 10 years beforehand, they were in the same barracks. And it gives that shared sense of bonding across not just the agency, but with others that have run in those overlapping circles.
Yeah. Did you have a part that was hard for you down at the farm, or was it all kind of fun because you're a college kid and you're just kind of young going through this thing? Or did you like the case officer stuff and the building rapport and the role playing stuff? Or did you love the driving is awesome. I mean, I love the driving is just so much fun. It's hard for the military to take the fun out of that. Like they take the fun out of everything, diving, jumping, whatever else. They try to take the fun out of absolutely everything, but they can't really take the fun out of the driving courses because it's too difficult. They gave up trying to take the fun away from those things. But what stands out to you from your time at the farm as either being impactful or fun or difficult?
I thought it was all fun. I may have had an unhealthy sense of ego at that time, so I didn't find any of it overly difficult or overwhelming. It was just fun. I loved to play the game. I loved to understand how the instructors were evaluating us throughout. It was sorry to see the students that wash out, but never had a doubt that I was going to end up being one of those. It just was sheer fun. And one of the interesting things was there were some military folks going through a similar course along the side. And so we got to share some notes with them. And you're right, the military took all the fun out of their course.
They excel at that.
Down to, the expense report requirements were radically different. And they had to, get permission to buy a tube of toothpaste, while on a surveillance run, sort of thing. And we didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. So it was just sheer unadulterated fun all the time.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So great.
Every one of us ultimately was like, I cannot believe we're getting paid
to
do this. We took what we were going through seriously, but we had so much fun. We're so excited to ultimately get overseas and start doing it. And one of the most impactful moments maybe for me was actually we were in training when the wall fell.
I was going to ask you about that.
And I remember we had just come in from an FTX. So we're all still in our BDUs and we're cleaning weapons and, all this sort of stuff. And we're looking at this black and white TV in the barracks that was, on rollers, casters that, like just this old piece of crap TV. And we're watching the West Berlin and East Berlin citizens just start to tear down that wall. And we're going, well, what does this mean for us? Like, that's who we joined to go fight against. And is it over? Do they not need us anymore? And of course, we didn't know at that moment, that the CT role would grow in such the way that it did, and we didn't know that the Russian threat was not going to go away.
Right. I mean, you're coming in right there on the cusp of that change, and that's interesting that you were there seeing that happen with your class. So I was asking about that. There's some very obviously seminal moments that are transitional periods in the history of the CIA. Obviously, end of World War II, disbanding essentially this organization, then the fight to stand up another one and who's going to lead it. 1947, obviously 48. Then we have some things in the 50s that are fascinating, and then you have a Bay of Pigs, probably fairly transitional. Cuban Missile Crisis, probably fairly transitional time frame. Then you have the Church Committee hearings in the mid 70s, Pike Committee, and then you have the fall of the Soviet Union, and then we have 9/11, So I think those ones are kind of the ones that stand out to me. Just doing a brief scan of history from World War II up to today. But you're there on the cusp, right during the time that one of those is happening.
Exactly.
And that's an incredible time to be there.
The day our class graduated, our very first classmate went overseas the next day.
Oh, wow.
In response to Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
Wow.
And, he had been he was an older guy in our class who was an experienced Arab linguist who had multiple years of SF experience as well as multiple years of NSA experience before joining us as a case officer. So, for him, it was just a natural plucking to take him and throw him out into that. And that began our focus on this new shift really into what this world was going to become. And a bunch of us ended up getting focused on the CT threat around the world in various regions and start learning how to work that CT target in ways because it's different than working the classical targets.
Yeah. So that's counterterrorism for people that are listening in. Did you guys do static line while you were there did you have to do that or no?
So the class before mine had several injuries in that class. So they actually would not let us do static, do our 5 jumps. And we were crushed by that because we really, really wanted to. They reinstituted it a little bit later, maybe 5 years after us. So we got to do all the tower jumps and all that sort of stuff, but we did not get our static line jumps in. And it's that's I'm always a little sad about it.
It's not very difficult. You just stand on a chair and jump off the chair, and that's pretty much, what it's like. But the Army takes like 3 days and packs it into 3 weeks. I think that's how we described airborne school when we went to Fort Benning.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Just jump. That was maybe tiny more to it.
I was going to say one of the most fun things though is that we did do was because of our Vietnam War history and working so much with insurgent forces, we did at that time spend a lot of time teaching you how to work with and supply those forces. Mm-hmm. So we got to spend a lot of time learning how to kick bundles out of C-47s,
nice,
DC-3s, and these were planes that had flown on D-Day.
Wow!
And so here we were, 21, 22 years old with our heads hanging out the door of, this plane looking for your LZ that you would, meticulously see built on the ground and kicking bundles out of it and that sort of stuff. So we got to do some fun stuff, Stabo, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Describe Stabo to people.
So, well, in this particular case, we had a long exercise, and the first 4 folks in were going to get put into Stabo harnesses. And I don't remember the acronym for what Stabo stands for, but basically seats, webbing, and you clipped into a rope, and then the helicopter lifted us up out of the canopy and flew us down through this area that the farm is located in as our extraction from this mission. And the rest of the folks either had to hump it out or get trucked out at the end. So there was a benefit to being one of the first 4 in. Nice. And I was fortunate enough to be one of those first 4 to complete that particular course. So we got to fly over this particular part of this training area for better part of 45 minutes, hanging from the bottom of a helicopter, just looking around at the view, which was pretty awesome.
There you go. It's interesting that you're using aircraft that flew on D-Day. Tom Rice is a 101st Airborne Division guy who first in his stick out over Normandy on D-Day, and he just passed away at age 101 a few months back. So my daughter and I went to his memorial. We took we were part of a group with the Best Defense Foundation that took him to Pearl Harbor for the 80th anniversary, and then we went to Normandy with him this past June. So that was really special for my daughter to hear those stories from him, not just read about them or hear it from somebody else, but to sit down across a table from him over a meal and hear him talk about jumping in to Normandy on D-Day.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It is incredible. To me, it's the power of storytelling is so important because it's where we learn to envision what we ourselves are capable of. I think it's most powerful within your family. Where you
write that down. I should write that down. That's a good one.
Where you hear from your own family what the people that share blood with you were able to do when asked to do these super hard things. But as a nation, these were 18, 19, 20-year-olds that we sent overseas to go do this incredibly difficult thing. And they did it. And they didn't have any different training than, this generation of 18, 19-year-olds have. that they are of that same stock. When needed, they can call upon that and step up and do it.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's great for this new generation to have a touch point with that generation and learn about those sacrifices firsthand, and be more appreciative of the freedoms that we have here and what was sacrificed so that we can have those freedoms and options and opportunities. So when you're finishing up at the farm, do you know where you're going, or do you know generally what part of the world you're going to be doing, or what kind of a mission you're going to be doing, or are you just training up as a case officer to kind of needs of the Navy, like needs of the CIA? Like what is it? Where during that process do you start to figure out or learn where you might be going?
Yeah, I think I describe it kind of as like a mix of, Greek rush in college and a draft, right? So, all of the case officer candidates are stack ranked, based on performance measurements that we have almost no visibility to throughout the process, right? You know whether you're doing well or not, but you don't know if you're better than Joe or worse than Cheryl. But you tend to have a somewhat of a sense, and throughout these interim assignments along the way, you've built some relationships with folks who may be evaluating whether you're a good fit for their region of the world or their particular mission set. And then you get to say what your desired choices are to go to and go do. And for some folks, it's, hey, I want to be in a place where I can wear suits all the time and learn, the classical romance languages, i.e. Europe, and walk those dark, somber, rainy, whatever,
right.
Prague streets. And for others, it's, we had classmates like, I want to go to the dirtiest, nastiest places I can and go, live on that adventure line and everywhere in between.
Yeah.
And they do their job. Needs of the service always comes first. So, I clearly came in with strong Spanish skills. So of course they sent me to Asia.
Sounds like the military. Yep.
Yes.
Exactly how it works. We had a fluent Spanish speaker over here. All right, let's send him to Arabic and send him to the Middle East, or, whatever. It's just kind of like, what? It's just how it goes. So did you put in for something, and then did you get that, or what was your path out of the farm to your first, and you call it a posting, or what do you call?
Yeah, assignment or posting. Yeah. Okay. We use both use both interchangeably. So I put in, I ended up getting what I wanted. So I immediately finished my training as a case officer and then got slotted into a new track for training, to give case officers who are going to the non-Arab world specific counterterrorism training, to work the counterterrorist target in those areas of the world. So they took 4 of us out of my class and began to put us in this pipeline that included basically the ability to go to almost any school we wanted to go to on the public side of things, to learn more driving skills, more shooting skills, all that sort of stuff. We went and spent time with other agencies. We could just kind of do what we wanted to do.
Is this the gun sight training? Is this when you did that?
That's when we did that. And
then you went to BSR too, I bet, West Virginia.
Exactly.
Nice.
BSR
That's
as well.
a good one.
And Colonel Cooper was still at Gunsight as well, which was pretty special.
That is pretty cool.
And we went and spent time with other federal agencies working this target as well, and overseas TDYs, temporary duty assignments, with specifically focused on the CT work, so that we began to understand more about this nature work long before ever our first assignment was. And so really built that extra skill set in along the way. And we went through an early version. I'm trying to figure out how to describe it, but an early version of the training pipeline for a group of people that most folks only know about because they watched a movie called 13 Hours.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
So we went through that, and that's where I first got to meet Billy Waugh.
Wow.
And Rick Prado, and guys like that. And Rick was my boss for a while during that time frame.
Got it. I think he mentioned that to me. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. He has that new a book came out last year. Fascinating. What a story.
It's a great book.
Yeah, amazing guy. Very cool. And then Billy Waugh, of course, has a book too. Was Hunting the Jackal? Yeah. And,
Hunting the Jackal, yeah.
I mean, what an incredible story. I almost had him on the podcast, and I think he might be getting a little up there in age.
Yeah, he is. I think he's 92 or 93.
Yeah.
And these days are pretty rough for him right now.
Yeah.
We all stay in touch with one another and get updates kind of on a weekly basis on that right now. So best wishes to Billy out there. He was actually an incredibly impactful man. I mean, we got to work overseas together as well.
Wow. Legend. For anybody listening right now who doesn't know who Billy Waugh is, just Google it. Use the search engine, and a bunch will pop up. But then Hunting the Jackal is a book that he wrote. But incredible guy, and at that age, obviously, he's been through a lot.
Yeah,
done a lot for this nation.
I just remember Billy got me home one night. His voice on the other end of a radio got me home on a night when I wasn't sure I was going to get home that night. And I will forever be grateful for that.
Wow. Amazing. So you go through this pipeline, you get to go meet Colonel Cooper and shoot a gun sight, get to do some evasive offensive driving techniques at BSR. And then you go off to your first posting, your first assignment.
Yeah, I do. I get ready to go. In the middle of all of that, in the middle of that training, I meet a girl. And I'm like, okay, I'm about to deploy in 5 months. I'm meeting this girl. Cool. This will be fun, but nothing serious. And within probably 3 weeks, we knew that we wanted to get married, and that this, like, my whole world had just changed with this. And along the way, obviously nobody knew I worked for CIA. I had a job that I was supposed to tell people, which is what I had told this young lady when I met her. And so began to immediately try to figure out, how do I tell her that that's not really what I do? Because, trust can be viewed as important in a pending marital relationship. And while you can have all the reasons for it, that makes sense, sometimes you still got to find a way through that. So that was actually one of my first real challenges in the agency, was how to break cover with the woman that would ultimately become my wife, and a CIA officer as well in her own right. And so that was interesting. And we did it, got through that, and I deployed, and she stayed home until our wedding date 5 months later. And we lived apart for 5 months, came back and got married. And she and I moved back overseas as a couple now.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And was she an analyst, or did she go to the farm, or?
So she was in a role that we now call a targeting role. Targeter. Mm-hmm. She was not at that time. She was a staff operations officer, and she was 100% CT focused for most of her career. In fact, she was working for Mike Scheuer and those folks that were in that first group of people chasing Bin Laden in the early 90s, before the Alex Station was set up.
Oh, wow. Because Alex Station came like mid 90s. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So she was there as it was stood up, and we were by that point getting ready to go on our second overseas assignment to a denied area post.
Jeez. So what was the first one then? I mean, you don't have to obviously say specifics, but so you're brand new, you did all this training, you have a girl waiting on you back home type thing, the classic, and then you deploy to this area of operations with a CT focus for 5 months. And what are you doing? Are you doing some classic, are you using this case officer skills, or are you doing more of this new track type thing?
I'm using case officer skills. I'm meeting a series of assets that were handed over to me, right? So one of the ways your training continues is you pick up assets that others have recruited, and you learn to run them, and figure out the mechanics of actually meeting with somebody overseas, keeping them safe, collecting intelligence, writing it up, and sending it back. And then all along the way you're looking for your own recruitment targets against kind of high priority, requirements coming out of headquarters in DC on a range of topics, because, along the way, the Russians are still out there, and the KGB is still operating. The Chinese are still out there. All of those classic targets remain there. The Iranians, North Koreans. So you may have a focus, but you're also looking for those other targets. And we were in a high threat post with an active terrorist threat against our organization, against Americans in specific. In fact, my job in that posting had opened up because an individual before me had ended up on a targeting list. So that meant he had to leave the country, and that gave me a slot that I could go jump into. And it was kind of a Wild West sort of environment, natively lots of guns in the environment. So it was an interesting and really, really fun time.
Yeah. And then, So you do that 5 months. What lessons did you take from that? So as a brand new guy, essentially. So in the military, you'd be the new guy in the platoon type of a deal. What do you take? What lessons are you taking from this first assignment? Do you like it? Or are you like, hey, I'm going to be in this organization forever. I love this. I have a mission. I'm supported. This is important. Like, what do you, or are you like, I'm going to do this a little while and then get out? Or what are you thinking at this point?
At that point, I'm still not sure. I'm now seeing some of the shine come off of the role a little bit.
Okay.
I tell the story of, I had an asset that I was picking up who'd been a longtime asset in the counterterrorism space, and it became my job to terminate him. And obviously, in our world, in the novel world, the word terminate means something very
with
specific.
Extreme prejudice.
Yeah, we'll terminate with extreme prejudice. And in this case, it just means terminate the relationship between the organization. And there's a process, and we're taught how to do all this. And
what's the movie? Take him out. Take him out. You want me to kill him? No,
right.
Don't kill him. Take him out for dinner. Whatever that was. Yeah.
Exactly.
Nomenclature.
So, but you're told you got to go terminate this asset. And he saw it coming long before I did. He knew where this was going. And so one of the most important lessons I learned was to be willing to learn from not just folks inside, but learn from others outside. That he made me a more compassionate, more empathetic officer through facilitating this process in ways, knowing that it was, we didn't honor ultimately some of what we had promised him at the front end of the relationship because of budget cuts, and figuring out how do you sell that concept to somebody in a way without selling a little bit of your soul was that first time where I went up, gosh, I don't like all of this. And that particular asset though, handled it with incredible grace, and it taught me a lot through how he did that.
Yeah, sometimes I kind of wonder, some of these people that we, whether it's host nation forces or, whatever else, like, have they not studied a bit of history and seen some of our track record, which isn't necessarily the greatest in a lot of cases? Vietnam, Kurds, latest example in Afghanistan. Or have they, that sort of a thing. Even popular culture, some of those, which used to be one of our most powerful exports from Hollywood, from let's say the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s around the world. That was what people understood the United States to be, which is why a lot of people came here because of the land of opportunity they're seeing in these films through popular culture. But a lot of times it also showed intelligence agencies not necessarily having the best interest of the particular asset in mind. And that obviously causes drama on screen and in the pages of novels and that sort of a thing. So I'm always I remember being in the back of a Hilux in 2003 in Afghanistan, and talking to somebody who had fought he'd been Muj against the Soviets and the whole thing. And then in my head, I'm thinking, man, we're going to leave here one day. And what's going to happen to this guy and his family? I mean, he's riding around in the back of a Hilux with me, obviously an American. Anyway, I was just always, I remember thinking of even back then, but that's interesting that your asset was not surprised.
Right. He was not surprised. And it's to me, one of the most fascinating things is that tension between an organization and the individuals that are in it, because I don't think there's any one individual that would have said, yeah, this is the right thing to do. But collectively as an organization, people recognize that it was the right thing to do. And so then it's up to individuals to execute on that right thing to do, even if it's challenging and hard to do. And I think it's tough. And you're right. It is tough to make that next promise to the next guy that we're going to follow through on what we do. I do think there are lots and lots of examples of where we have also followed through on some of those things, those promises to take care of folks. And on balance, I think on an individual case by case basis, we have honored that way more than we have fallen through. On those collective examples that we look at, whether it's Vietnam or Afghanistan or Cuba or some of those, it's when it's those group things where we tend to have fallen short based on political realities.
Got it. And when did you understand what the case officer's job was? Was it as part of before you went to the farm or while you're there? You're like, okay, my job is to get someone to essentially betray their country for reasons X, Y, or Z, and then keep that relationship going over turnovers with other case officers, because you're not going to stay there for 30 years working one guy probably. So when did you understand what that job was, and what is that job of a case officer?
Yeah, I learned the paper version of what it was within a week or two of being at the organization, and the reality of it by the time I got overseas, because it's through all the training and the role playing and all of that, it's role playing. It's role playing, right? Mark Polymeropoulos has talked about this asset who ultimately looked at him and said, you probably think about me when you're getting ready to prepare to meet with me, but I think about you every day, because if you screw this up, my life is gone, and you can't understand that until you meet with somebody who that's true about. And so it becomes an intellectual exercise that translates into real. But the job, as I describe it to most folks, is it's probably the toughest sales job in the world. Your job is to convince somebody to commit treason against their own nation or organization for us, with the potentially of loss of life or death or imprisonment for them and potentially their families if they get caught. And the worst thing that's generally going to happen to me or another case officer is I might get roughed up and then given 24 hours to get out of the country. But for the most part, if I screw up, that's going to be what's going to happen. And that's not true for them. And so that becomes an incredibly intense responsibility that we take on to serve those who've agreed to serve us.
Yeah. Oh man. And then you go to this next assignment. You come home. Is there like a decompression stop at headquarters to debrief and then study up on where you're going next, and then off you go, or how does that work?
Yeah, it all depends, right? So as you know, right, military, the answer to almost all real questions is it depends. I went out, did this assignment for 2 years, had a lot of fun, really great, tour. Got selected for what we call a denied area tour. So that's a Moscow rules type operations tour. And so when you get selected for one of those roles, you have a whole nother training pipeline you have to go through to learn to operate in that environment. And so if going to the farm that first time is, getting your undergraduate degree in espionage, getting ready to go to a denied area tour is grad school. And it's learning all the tools, techniques, and tradecraft to operate against services that are as good as us in places where they have home court advantage. And so that training pipeline and the language pipeline for that particular assignment was 2 full years.
Wow.
For me, between those 2 assignments.
Wow.
And then we ultimately, and in fact, they had selected 2 of us for one slot and put both of us through the language pipeline together. And then ultimately, we're going to select one of us for the assignment. And I got that pick.
Wow. That's amazing. And you're still in this transitional period between old school spycraft, I would say, and modern day. They hadn't even invented some of the ints yet, I don't think, in this mid 90s period. Yeah, I don't even know if anybody even used the term open source intelligence back then or whatever. Signals was something different. It was the same, but it was obviously there's not as many of these types of platforms to exploit and get information. So you're in this time where you're really focused on some old school tradecraft that people have been doing 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
100% old school tradecraft, and going to assignment where I know I'm going to be covered up with local surveillance on an ongoing basis, and learning how to, or not learning, having to operate in that particular environment in a place where we were very concerned about the possibility of flaps. So
it's a flap.
We had some flap where you cause a problem with that rises to the diplomatic level of hurting the relationship or the reputation of our country there. Okay. And so we had some pretty tight rules of engagement.
Diplomatic flap, yes.
Yeah, diplomatic flap. Yeah. So we were restrained on what we were allowed to do internally, in addition to being covered up by the local service pretty well.
And how long is an assignment like that if you if you're not either compromised be it any fault of your own or not, regardless. How long is that assignment with those 2 years of training? How long are you expected to operate in that kind of an environment?
It was a 2-year assignment.
So 2 year assignment over there.
Yeah. When I think about the cost of that, and then, the return to the organization, I sometimes wonder if the math is worth it. 2 years of full-time training for 2 years there. But we went out, we did the job that we were asked to do and did it well. So yeah.
Amazing. What lessons did you take from that experience? Personal or professional lessons? Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest, it was interesting. Knowing that you have audio and video coverage potentially in your house, it forces you to grapple with some interesting stuff at a relationship level with your spouse. And I remember one day we lived in a tall, skinny house, and we had our first child in that particular assignment. And so the baby was on the third floor with a baby monitor. We were on the second floor, and we could hear the staff in the kitchen talking through the baby monitor, because it turned out it was on the same frequency as the baby monitor in the baby's bedroom was, and There was no monitor downstairs. Wow. And so we dealing with that was a lesson we had to work our way through. And then the other one was, this is where it sunk in that perception is reality, right? So my intent of actions sometimes wouldn't matter. It was the folks watching me's perception of my intent that had way more import. And so if I talked to the wrong person in the wrong way, I could put them in jail without ever knowing it, because they could be perceived as having done something with me because I'm being surveilled. Mm-hmm. And so learning to operate in a way that attempted to control the opposition's perception of how I was operating was interesting. And, you learn some lessons when you pissed them off as well. They kept stealing the mirrors off my vehicle so that I couldn't use the mirrors to spot surveillance. And then I'd have to go buy mirrors back, reinstall mirrors on my vehicle.
No kidding.
Yes. And so we had, things like that. And then funny. The last lesson probably was the bonding you do with others who are serving in really difficult environments, and what is, when you come together and serve in those ways together, it builds a special and unique bond.
Yeah, amazing. And then you come back, and what's next for you?
I actually didn't come back. I went directly to my third posting, which was in another capital city. All of my particular assignments were in capital cities. That's not always true. But this one, if the first one was a high threat post and the second one was a denied area post, this was a low threat, classical, large metropolitan area that had access to everything that you could desire. All the targets, all the interesting work, all the dysfunction of a big bureaucracy. It was a large station, and so that really began kind of me thinking about my path out, because I knew my next assignment was probably going to be back at headquarters. My next assignment was going to be moving into a headquarters management role. I was 30 at this point in time and was a GS 13. And looking at that path from 13 to 15, and looking at the path from 30 to 50, and going, okay, going fast was good. Staying for the next 20 years doesn't look quite so much fun. And figuring all that out. And ultimately, it was a frustrating tour. I wasn't as successful about it. I didn't have good mentoring in that time frame, and I didn't know how to seek it out well. And so ultimately, that assignment was what caused us to step out of the organization.
Got it. And did your wife go with you, or did she stay in for a few more years?
So it's interesting. So she went with me. She had actually gone on what we call LWOP, leave without pay, when our second child was born. And so when I resigned, it turns out she was still on LWOP status, and it just fell through the cracks. And she stayed on LWOP status for probably 4 more years, without us ever even knowing she was still on LWOP status. Her LWOP status just expired, and she lost her clearances and it was just done, and never having gone back. And so, we moved back to the States, moved to the East Coast, went to grad school, and then stepped into the private sector right as 9/11 happened.
Yeah. Where were you? You were home by that point then?
Yeah, I just gotten home and had called everybody and was like, wait, do we come back? What do we do? And we had 2 kids by then, and my wife was pregnant with our third. And I talked to my buddies that were still in, and they said, look, it's totally up to you. Like if you want to get back in the fight, you can, but your situation's changing with with the kids and that sort of stuff. And we got this if you're not ready to come back. And we just decided not to come back. And I was pretty sour at the organization right then. I loved the folks I worked with, but I was pretty sour at the organization. And so it was a relatively easy call to not go do, unaccompanied assignments in the war zones. That was going to be everyone's life for the next few weeks, months, years.
Yeah. Yeah. When was the first time you heard the name Osama bin Laden? Was it from your wife working in that cell or office that she was in, or had you heard it before? When did you start hearing it, and had you heard more and more over the years because your wife was focused on that particular threat?
Yeah, I'd heard bin Laden's name in probably 92.
Oh, wow. Early.
In 93. With Ramzi Youssef and those guys, because that was the specific target set she was working both overseas and at headquarters.
Yeah. So for those listening, Ramzi Youssef, he's now locked up in ADX Supermax, Colorado, Florence, but he was one of the people responsible for the first World Trade Center bombing, then made it to the Philippines, and was eventually apprehended in Pakistan, right?
That's right. That's right. But, working the Bojinka plot and all that sort of stuff that was stuff she was working on. So that was when I first began to hear it. And then obviously that intensified once we got back over to the headquarters, and she was working in CTC, the Counterterrorist Center at the time. And this is how small CTC was. Her branch at the time was called Islamic Extremists Branch. Because our focus in CTC at that moment in time was on 17 November and Red Army faction and all of these other organizations, PLO and stuff. We had one branch focused on all of the Islamic extremist organizations around the world. And obviously that radically changed over the next decade.
Yeah, no kidding. Did at the time you were going through training and then afterward at these assignments, did the shadow of Buckley abducted in Beirut in the 80s, did that loom large still? Did people talk about that? Were there lessons from that? Or some of the people that you trained with must have obviously known him and been very familiar with that situation.
Yeah, so for us in training, they brought in groups specifically focused on both Buckley as well as the Iran embassy takeover, the Tehran embassy takeover. And so we learned a lot of lessons from those folks involved in those two things. And then there were some other assassinations that had happened of U.S. military members in the Philippines and others, where we also had some lessons learned that were shared with us along the way. Yeah, Nick Rowe. So we got to see some of the TTPs change as a result of some of those things, but it wasn't always shared with all of us in training. It was shared primarily with those of us who were going to higher threat posts. Other than the Iran embassy hostage situation, where we all spent time learning from them. The rest of it was for folks that were going into higher threat posts.
You brought up Iran. Did anybody talk about Kermit Roosevelt in 1953 Iran, or was that kind of not really talked about too much?
We didn't talk about that much at the time. And it's interesting, right? So, I now teach at the University of New Hampshire on intelligence studies. And I think there was a missed opportunity for all of us to have spent a lot more time on lessons learned from some of those sorts of things, right? I think the agency's gotten better at it over time, obviously, of some navel gazing and reflection on some of that. But we did not spend as much time talking about or learning from some of those failures as I think might have been better.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you think about that one. If the technology existed back then to communicate the way we can today, and not even change the oversight. Obviously, has changed quite a bit. But even if you take that off and just say put communication in place, like almost real time communication, not having to just avoid a phone ringing, but having it being able to be reached all the time. Like maybe that turns out differently. I don't know.
Exactly.
That's really, that really had some far-reaching implications, obviously, as we all know.
It's pretty interesting when you think about some of those things, and you don't necessarily see in the moment how broad those implications may become, right? That butterfly wing effect that then echoes for decades.
Yeah, decades, man. And once again, this December, I think it was December, I might get the date wrong, let's say mid-December, there's another opportunity to declassify some files that people have been waiting on for a number of years. In fact, Congress in 1992, I want to say, mandated that these files would be, by 2017, I think it was, all declassified. Guess what? The executive branch is not paying attention to the legislative branch. And President Trump was going to do it, said he was going to do it. Then apparently there was some sort of a meeting with the CIA and sources and methods. Once again, we can't declassify some of these things. Okay. And then goes over to the Biden administration. Last year, COVID, we need a little more time here. Since 1963 has not been enough time. Since 1992, when it has been legally mandated that we declassify some of these things, or unredact some of these things, maybe I should say. Not enough time. We still need a COVID. It's literally a little more time here. And it came up again just a month ago. And what happens? Still, there are parts of these documents that are redacted. So sources and methods always thrown out there. It's been a long time. It doesn't do anything to garner trust or rebuild trust with the citizenry when all these years later, these people who have been mandated by law to declassify or unredact some of these documents still neglect to do so. What are your thoughts on that?
It's pretty wild to me, because when I think about, here we are 60 years later from that time frame. And there cannot be any source alive today who was still at all in any way connected with that. Maybe there's some methods, but I can't imagine that there's a method that was used then that's not been identified through some other mechanism along the way. So it leads to at least the perception that it's fear of reputational damage more than anything else, fear of embarrassment, that it's not really protecting anything meaningful, but it's protecting reputations. And that, I think, does incredible harm to the institution's trust level from the American public. And it's almost like they're just making bad chess decisions without thinking about what does it mean to the average person who's going to read or view that, and weighing the calculus of benefit versus real risk. So I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it makes any sense.
I know it's a very odd situation. I mean, you'd have to think that at the very least that our intelligence agencies, whether it's CIA, FBI, and whoever, was more aware of what was going on that day than they let the Warren Commission certainly believe, or any other investigations that have happened since. I mean, that's like high level, or like that's the best case, I think. Like that why else? And then, of course, you can dig down into all the other stuff as well, which I do in this next novel. So I'm so excited to send you my next novel, because there are some touch points with OSS, World War II, that transition to the CIA, what goes on in the 50s and 60s. And there's kind of some family history from my main character's past that kind of comes up in the present. So I'm curious what you think. Of course, it's fiction. There's fiction, but there's some other geopolitical stuff in there, present day, that I'm curious to get your take on, because I weave some Iran, Russia, China kind of geopolitics into it and kind of, anyway, I'm excited to send it to you.
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
And is it really fiction? Like,
well, I don't know. It's tougher and tougher to write fiction these days because all these things that are happening in real life that would have been fiction 10 years ago or science fiction 10 years ago are now just normal. Everyday events. I mean, imagine going like, let's say 1985, if the stuff about UFOs that came out over the last 2 or 3 years had come out in 1985, that would have been on the cover of Newsweek, Time, New York Times, everywhere. People would be talking about it, would still be talking about it, even if it happened 3 years ago on the nightly news at 6 p.m., that sort of thing, 5 p.m., whatever. But it's like, oh, UFOs, of course, yeah, next. It's like, no one cares.
Yeah. Picked it.
Yeah. It's so wild. It's so wild.
It is wild. I mean, obviously, the pace at which information, gets absorbed and the sheer volume of information out there is radical as well. And so it's, when you think about back to the declassification issue and, conspiracy theories and, all of that, it's fodder for you as a writer. Fantastic. For sure. But it's, I think we do the intellect of our nation a disservice by hiding stuff that doesn't need to be hidden. Mm-hmm. And we undermine the ability to hide stuff that really does need to be hidden in the long run as well. Exactly.
Do you know if conspiracy theory was born out of the JFK assassination? Was it used before 1963? Do you know?
I mean, I can pretend to know, but no, I don't know. I would assume it must have been used at some point in time, right? Be interesting from an etymology perspective to go back and look at the language and see if there was, for example, conspiracy about Lincoln's assassination.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if they said conspiracy theory, though.
That's what I mean. Yeah, the science of the words, what words were used when.
Yeah.
It'd be fascinating to look at that.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up. I should probably weave that into this next novel. Could add that in for some character development. I love doing things like that. But yeah, what a fascinating time in history that was, because I do think that November 1963 was one of those pivotal points for the nation, not just our intelligence services, but our nation as a whole. And you hear people talk about losing our innocence as a nation, like that sort of thing. There's something to that. That's when people up to that point, I think, generally, from the end of World War II to 1963, generally, I would say, trusted the government. I'd say 1962 to 1975 was this tremendous period of undermining of trust in the government, and largely driven by the government's choices made along the way to manipulate, conceal, cajole, whatever, the public's opinion of it. And that then carries a cost forward another 2 decades on, that I think you see, reverberating even today in the distrust of the government. And, it's far more easy to burn trust than to earn it. Yeah.
And so I think that period of time still has scarred us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope you're going to like this book then. And I have a little, a theory that I read in high school. So let's say late 80s, from a thriller author who wrote a book in the 60s, and it stuck with me. And so I've woven that in. I don't go deep on it, but I throw it in there as touch points for those who have read, are fans of the thriller genre, the espionage genre, that sort of thing. So I wove that in because I've never seen it in another book since. So I wove that in there, and I talk about it in the acknowledgments and all that sort of a thing to give credit to that author. But anyway, I'm curious what you're gonna think about it, because it's
very cool. I'm stoked to read it.
And what's the James Foley Foundation? I know you're involved with them these days.
So I'm on the board of the James Foley Foundation. So Jim Foley was a journalist, right? We all saw his horrible murder on YouTube when the Beatles, the 4 ISIS members, so brutally murdered him.
And this is Syria, 2013?
2013. In the aftermath of his death, this foundation was stood up to advocate on behalf of families of U.S. hostages abroad. At that moment in time, the U.S.'s hostage policy was radically different than many other nations, right? Everybody's familiar with, or maybe not, but at that point in time, America's publicly stated policy was we don't negotiate with terrorists. And the rest of the world's policy has been for a long time, we do negotiate with terrorists. We're willing to talk to them. Our policy was rooted in the fear that negotiation with them was going to embolden more terrorist taking. And there's a lot of science on that says that's not necessarily true, but it was where we were at the time. Mm-hmm. And so Diane Foley, Jim Foley's mom, became an incredibly active advocate during his captivity to force the government to confront this policy and put into place ways to deal with it, to try and get her son home. And unfortunately, she was not able to get him home. And in fact, his body has never been returned home. But the foundation was stood up, and we've been ever since working as hard as possible with our government and other governments to try and bring Americans home. And we've been successful in that in many ways. We've changed U.S. law in many ways to do this, and focus on bringing Americans home from overseas.
Amazing. I mean, people can go find out more information about that. Go with JimFoleyFoundation.org or
James W. Foley Foundation, James W. Foley Legacy Foundation, and they'll be able to look it up there. It's a tremendously powerful group of people that are committed to serving this mission well. And Diane Foley is one of the most amazing women I've ever had the privilege to meet in my life. And I'll tell you a small story. So we know them because we went to church with their family. And so we had known Jim as well. And we were at Jim's wake, and big public event, and we're making our condolences. And Mrs. Foley walks up to me and she puts a $20 bill into my hand. And I said, Diane, what is this? And she goes, well, your son is raising money for his Eagle Scout project, right? And I said, he is. She goes, well, I want to contribute to his Eagle Scout project. And I thought, here we are at this event where we're celebrating a wake for her son's, murder. And she has the presence of mind to think of others in this way, was just powerful. Yeah. I learned a lot from her.
Yeah. Amazing. And I'll put that in the show notes. People can click on that and go check all that out. Well, I also want to say, I saw you post about the Browning High Power a little while ago. Oh, yeah. And so I have one in this next novel also, but I just took it out the other day because I felt like I was forcing it in to this one. It was in my outline. It was in the whole thing. I was ready to get to that scene and those sets of chapters. And I felt like I was forcing it in there. So I might put it back if I can figure out a way to get it back in there. But anyway, it was gonna play a prominent role in a series of chapters, but it might make it back in. We'll see. But I wanted to.
So that was my issue weapon. Overseas. Oh,
no way! No kidding. So you're still using the Browning High Power in mid '90s.
Yeah. So I was using Browning High Power as my primary, and then a Smith model, Chief Special.
So a wheel gun for those listening. So a revolver. No kidding.
A backup holster was my backup gun.
Did you wear that on your ankle? Where'd you wear your backup?
I did on an ankle holster.
No kidding. How many mags did you carry with the Browning High Power?
I carried 2 mags with the Browning High Power, often in a really cheesy Velcro rip away, holster, fanny pack holster, or in a Bianchi pancake.
No
depending
kidding.
On the need. Wow. And it was interesting. And there were times where we would go to a place and I would have to give up the primary for various reasons and have that Chief Special with 5 rounds of 38 Special on my ankle.
Nice.
And that was it.
Nice. I have a titanium Smith & Wesson wheel gun as well that I have a couple different holsters for. It's nice to have, and you kind of forget it's even there. But I want to get a Browning High Power. I think I'm gonna ask Jason Burton at Heirloom Precision to build me one up. Because I need to have one for the collection, for research, of course. Research.
That I think, and you got to do that. Just watch that slide bite. Or the hammer bite.
Yep, exactly. I think he did some special stuff to him. So I think he accounts for some of that.
All of us got bloodletted here, nice. From that hammer bite.
When did they stop carrying Browning High Powers? What did they go? It had to have been like late 90s.
No, I know folks that carried it in Afghanistan.
Really?
So it was carried through the transition into Glocks and SIGs in the GWAT. So they're definitely, in fact, I'm blanking on his name, David, in Toby Harden's book.
Blanking as well, but okay.
Anyway, that he was carrying a Browning High Power in Kali Jangi the day that Mike Spann was killed.
No kidding. Wow.
So yeah, we absolutely that Browning high power has served us well and for decades.
Wow. Amazing. I wonder where those went. If they've all been replaced. There might be a couple guys still carrying them and that have a nostalgic attachment. But I wonder where those went. If they just go into a safe somewhere and just get kind of locked up for historical purposes, or if somebody can acquire one.
A lot of us wondered where they went, and I know at least some were lost and ended up in footlockers along the way.
As it should be.
Sure.
I love it. I love it. Did they issue a watch by any chance at any point in time?
We were not issued watches at that point in time. It was funny. We were all jealous of all the Vietnam vets and their submariners, with their Alonga Post silver bracelets and
Nice.
That sort of stuff. And at that time, we didn't know about the issue watches that they'd given to the A-12 pilots, the Bulova Accutron.
Did you post about that the other day? Somebody did, like watches of espionage, maybe.
Yeah, Watches of Espionage posted about it. I've got one on my Instagram as well.
Okay,
That's
Texas Spy Dad for those listening, at Texas Spy Dad.
And so that watch was issued specifically to the Oxcart pilots.
Wow.
And that's a unique watch. It's really neat to pick one up, and you can find them relatively easily as well. But we were never really issued a watch, sadly.
Got it. The Oxcart, I put that in the second novel there because a lot of people don't know about that. So it's amazing history. There's so much incredible history, interesting history, complex history at the CIA. Like I said, I was going to bring those books in, but they stack pretty high. My agency books, I've been collecting them for so long, really since I was a little kid, and I still have everything. So it's I have quite the stack in the library inside there. Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the reasons I started my Instagram so long ago was to kind of share stories of that history with folks. Yeah. I'm a fan of the organization and a fan of the need for the organization. Would love to see, it take responsibility for both successes and failures. But at the end of the day, I want people to recognize the need for it and encourage them to learn the history of it. And we need good people to step up to do hard things in dangerous places. And that holds true in the special operations community, the regular military, as well as the IC.
Yeah, no, exactly. And talk about Inglorious Amateurs. Where did this come from?
Well, it was born out of that same desire to share stories of the agency with folks. So everything we've put out there was designed to encourage folks to learn about the history and to support it and to raise money along the way for a couple of the agency-oriented charities that we've been supporting, the Third Option Foundation and the CIA Officers Memorial Foundation. And we've gotten to do some neat stuff along the way and partner with folks to do it. We're on hiatus right now. We're having to take some time off from Inglorious Amateurs while a couple of us sort through personal stuff, but we'll get it back.
Oh, good, because I need to go order some more T-shirts. I think I have 3 T-shirts right now. I was going to order some more stuff, so let me know when it's back up. I want to get.
I will. We've had a lot of fun doing that stuff.
Nice. And I did want to also ask you about, when you get these guys, when these people come in to the leadership positions at the CIA and they're appointed and, sometimes they're interim and so they don't have to go through the full process and they're in there for a little while, but then they go in front of Congress and they go through that whole process and they're sitting up there in the seat. And then they get out and then you have 50 intelligence officials talking about Russian disinformation that is later proven to be not true, specifically with Hunter Biden's laptop right before an election. Does that degrade they're out? They're out, private citizens, but they're probably consulting. They're on boards. They're doing the things that like generals do and people that head intelligence agencies do after they get out. But it seems it undermines the credibility of the organization that they once served by doing something like that. It seems unnecessary. It seems let's just say there's no quote unquote proof either way, but you stake your reputation and the reputation of your agency on the line by signing a letter or whatever it is that says this is Russian disinformation, and it ends up not being true. I mean, there should at least been questions back then by those guys to say, wait, maybe it's true, but maybe it's not. I'm just going to hold off here until I have more information. But no, they don't do that. They sit up there and they sit on CNN and MSNBC or whoever else gives them the platform, and they sign a letter and they send it to whoever they send it to, putting their reputation and the reputation of the entire organization that they serve maybe for a year, 2, 3, whatever it might be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it serves their ego, right? And I think that's one of the frustrating things about it. The other thing, the bigger concern for me, in addition to the reputational concern domestically, is it giving the enemy, the opposition, levers that they can now use to recruit their own sources within our organization? We've talked primarily about our effort to go out and recruit sources, to work for us, but guess what? That's what the Cubans and the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans are still doing today, and we've seen they've done it successfully. So there's no way they don't look at that as a gold mine of information that lets them pull levers to manipulate motivations to recruit sources inside our own organization.
Yeah. I mean, people think of Cuba and they, mind jumps to Cuban Missile Crisis and Bay of Pigs and that sort of a thing, especially in regards to the agency. But they had a very robust intelligence gathering operation focused on people at CIA, DIA, like Ana Montes, NSA. Yeah. So, what was your what are your thoughts on Cuba? What it was then in say 90s, early 2000s, and what it is today?
Yeah, I mean, so back then they were really good at what they did, right? Their ability to recruit sources and run them, and they were such an active part of the proxy wars, that played out over the 80s and 90s. My first exposure to the Cubans was working on a covert action program in a place that was not Cuba, where the Cubans served as a proxy for the Russians in an armed conflict. Mm-hmm. And, we had our own proxies that we were working with there, and people can put those pieces together pretty easily. And they were excellent. They were very good and posed a significant threat. Obviously today it's not the same thing, but, I don't think their capability has gone away. And from an intelligence skill set perspective, they just play a significantly less important role in the world right now.
Yeah, and with your background, you stayed interested in history and intelligence operations and history of the agency and emerging threats and all the rest of it. When you look at a Russia-China relationship now and going forward here, what are your thoughts on what's going on there? And then giving up Afghanistan, having Chinese maybe move into Bagram, having that lithium there, gas and oil deals between Russia and China. People talk a lot about that sort of thing now. They forget that they shared a very long border during the Cold War, and it was often contentious. Right. But what are your thoughts on that relationship?
We have short attention spans. We think in terms of quarters, election cycles, presidential campaigns. China and Russia and Iran, they think in generations, and they're willing to invest in and put into place tools, assets, and programs that last generations. They play a much longer game than we do. We play by better rules, right? Which is important to who we are as a nation. It's important that we play by rules. They don't allow themselves to be constrained by those same rules. So we have to learn to play differently within our rules while knowing that they're not. I look at Africa and I look at what's taking place. The Chinese takeover of parts of Eastern Africa and the procurement of resources is 100%, economic warfare. Economic espionage and warfare combined. You look at that happening in other parts of the world and you go, okay, they're leveraging public-private resources, public-private partnerships in ways that we can't, we're not allowed to. And so we need to spend time. We need to have big brain people looking at that are not constrained by current election cycles, saying, what do we need to have programmatically in place that carries us through these generational things? And then I guess the last point on it is we tend to be too easily distracted. And obviously this last 2 decades of the GWAT, while rooted in some important stuff we needed to go do, I think also served to distract us while the rest of the world continued to go do what they have always done, which is to focus on their core interest and building their interest. And so we need to find a better balance in that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited for you to check out this next book because I have something almost exactly like that woven in there. And before I let you go, you have a little Hollywood connection going on. You work on some shows,
That's right.
some films. You get do some technical advising. You get veterans in there that know what they're doing with with firearms. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. A long time ago, the mid 2010s. A guy reached out to me on social media and said, "Hey, we got a team of SOF veterans that are focused on helping making films, and we'd like a CIA officer's perspective on it." And of course, I thought it was a potential scam brewing, but it turned out to have been true. And we went off into the desert, and we had some guys like Dale Comstock and Jim Irwin and Mikhail Vega, and we went and made some zombie movies together and started working on Hollywood projects. Flying around in little birds and shooting miniguns and riding dirt bikes and all that.
Nice.
I mean, so we're all in our 40s and not getting to do the fun stuff anymore. So it was a way to step back in and do some of that. And along the way, it just led to different connections. So we got to advise on some fun film and TV projects. You and I share the connection of getting to work with Chris Pratt. He obviously did your Terminal List series, and I'm the technical advisor on a film project that he is involved with called Cowboy Ninja Viking.
Yeah. Is that still going on? What happened with that one?
It's currently on hold right now for budget reasons, but we'll see if budget negotiations that cost us the hole in his schedule. So, I don't know if it'll ever be revived again, but it was fun to get to work with him a little bit cool. On that. I know he was very passionate about that, actually, cool. Getting off the ground. And then now I get to put a lot of vets on the TV show SWAT. And what's great about that is for many of them, it's their first foray into acting. Mm-hmm. The show is great about supporting the veterans community. So we have a lot of veterans on the crew. Our lead technical advisor is a former SWAT officer, but it was also a Navy veteran. Mm-hmm. And I've put hundreds of vets on the 6 seasons of SWAT and other television shows like it, where we need guys and ladies who can put on a uniform, wear it well, follow orders, operate weaponry and tactically sound ways, and make those shows better.
Nice. Were you at the Oscars? Did I see you in a picture on your Instagram or something like that when you're a tuxedo?
I did. Yeah. I got to, one of the great benefits of this was getting to go to the Oscars a few years ago and spend some time with some folks on projects we were working on with there. And I'm very grateful for the folks at Sony who set that up.
Oh man, that is awesome. And I do want to ask you, so what's the Lost Leonardo?
So the Lost Leonardo was a great film that came out last year. It actually was nominated for a number of awards. And it was a documentary about a painting by Leonardo da Vinci that was discovered in New Orleans in the early 2000s that an art dealer bought for $1,100 that was ultimately sold to Mohammed bin Salman for $450 million over the course of 15 years. And the intrigue and mystery behind was it really a Leonardo da Vinci painting? Where did the money come from? Who owns it? Where is it? Why does a Saudi prince own a portrait of Christ? All kinds of twists and turns in it, with some Russian oligarch connections in the midst of it. And so I was, along with an FBI agent, part of the team that was helping unravel this story and how it took place on the world stage. And there's still some unanswered questions in it. So we asked the audience who watches that film, The Lost Leonardo, to come to their own conclusions. And it's on Amazon Prime and Netflix and all those places today. Nice.
I'm going to go check it out because I haven't seen it yet. Is it based on a book or something? It sounds like it would be based on a book.
It's not. It's not based on a book. There have been books written about it that are parallel to it, but it was these Dutch filmmakers that came together and started pulling at the threads of this story, and wanted to uncover what ultimately happened to it and where it went. And it's a documentary, but it has an amazing amount of intrigue and mystery in it. So it flows like a fictional film.
Nice. Love it. And what else you got going on these days? What are you, what's ahead for you?
Right now, just continue to work on film projects, working on with some my family, trying to get some good family time in, that sort of stuff. So
got it. Well, I wanted to also thank you for sending me this Robert Roark, the Old Man and the Boy, and thank you. So it sits right here in the podcast studio, right here behind me every time that I'm in here, with a couple other special books right there. But thank you for thinking of me and sending this. I sincerely appreciate it. It means a lot.
Absolutely.
To me.
As you know, I wrote an article recently that was a series of my 5 most impactful books, and that was number 1 on that list. In fact, I gave my father a copy of it in 1994.
Oh, wow.
Because I grew up hunting and fishing with my father and my grandfather, and obviously that theme is carried throughout that book. And my dad then took that copy that I gave him in 94 and reinscribed it for my son, and my oldest son, and gave it to him this year.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's pretty special.
That is. Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for spending so much time today. I really appreciate it. And you're out there doing family stuff. So thank you for taking a break from that to sit down for a little bit.
No, absolutely. You're going to hopefully get in some duck hunting this week. We'll see how that goes.
Oh, nice. There you go. Yeah, I'm in lockdown here working on a bunch of different projects. So my goal for 2023 is to get a little more organized so that I can stop canceling hunts and stop canceling vacations and go and do some of those things with the family. So yeah, but hey, man, thank you so much for all you've done for the country, what you continue to do here on the outside, and also being such a great inspiration for people that are coming up that are interested in these sorts of things, and just being a leader in everything that you do. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's a lot of fun to read your books. It's a lot of fun to watch them get told on screen. I would encourage everybody to go read the Terminal List before you watch it, so that you can, it's always a special pleasure when you get to draw in your own mind's eye what you see, rather than how a director may interpret it. So go read it before you watch it. But it's really fun to see all that. And my sister-in-law works in a bookstore, and she said she's always selling copies of your book. So
nice.
She loves when people come in and ask about it.
So I love that.
She's really stoked about this.
Oh man, that is awesome. Please tell her I said hi, and I appreciate that. I mean, independent bookstores across the country, I just love. Every time I go to a town and I see one, I go in and support them by buying something. Yeah, please encourage everybody to visit their local independent bookstore, or as they're traveling, stop in at an independent bookstore and pick something up there for the plane ride home.
Sure will. Yeah, I appreciate you giving that shout out to it. It's such an important role. But thank you for having me on today. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, great getting to hang out for a little bit, and hopefully we'll link up in person here soon.
Sounds great. Stay safe, brother.
All right, you too. Take care.
Bye.
We all know how finances can take a major hit during the holiday season. That's why you need to go to NavyFederal.org and check out everything that they have going on. I have been a member since 1996, and I could not be more pleased with how all of that has gone. Partner up with Navy Federal Credit Union to pay down credit card debt. You could get into low APR on balance transfers with their Platinum credit card. It's their lowest rate card, and it's a great tool to pay down debt. Navy Federal can even help get you started on your next home improvement project. They offer home equity line of credit with convenient access to funds when you need them at a variable rate. You can also get a fixed rate equity loan that has set monthly payments for large purchases. Consolidating debt with a home equity loan could also streamline and lower your monthly payments. Learn more at NavyFederal.org, where their members are the mission. Insured by NCUA, Equal Housing Lender. Membership required. Loans subject to approval. Call 1-888-842-6328 for details about credit card costs and terms. HELOC APR as low as 6.5% as of November 23rd, 2022. Black Rifle Coffee Company, the coffee that I drink every single day and powers me through my novels. Black Rifle Coffee Company set out on a mission to make the best cup of coffee that's ever hit your mug. The dream was to sell enough premium coffee to be able to build a support network for veterans, first responders, and law enforcement. Thanks to your support, all that dream has become a reality. Black Rifle Coffee is roasted by a veteran-led team of brilliant coffee graders here in the United States who work tirelessly to roast and bag the highest quality coffee right here in America. The coffee is truly one of a kind, but it's your support that gets gear, funding, and supplies into the hands of those on our front lines. This year alone, your support has helped Black Rifle Coffee Company expand our team of active duty service members, veterans, and veteran family members. Black Rifle was also able to donate over 120,000 bags of coffee to veterans and first responders in 2022. All thanks to you. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com and use code DangerClose20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. That's blackriflecoffee.com and use code DangerClose20. You can also find Black Rifle Coffee in grocery and convenience stores near you. Black Rifle Coffee, America's coffee. You know there are different grades of fuel for your vehicle, but did you know there's different grades of fuel for your mind? When your mind gets low quality fuel, it gets easily distracted, fatigues quickly, and leaves you swamped in brain fog. But when it gets high quality fuel that's packed with the electrolytes it needs to operate at optimal levels, your brain cells fire more quickly and efficiently, which keeps you focused, energized, and ready for anything. That's why Navy SEAL veteran Nick Norris created Protect Hydration. It's an electrolyte supplement that contains the optimal ratio of electrolytes your mind needs without any of the sugar, artificial sweeteners, or other junk it doesn't. And people love it so much, it sold out 3 times in 2022. They just got some back in stock right now. Danger Close listeners can get 25% off. Visit Protect, PROTEKT.com/DangerClose and start giving your mind higher quality fuel today. Once again, visit Protect, PROTEKT.com/DangerClose for 25% off. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. First off, this right here, this desk, badass-workbench.com. And this thing is solid. Great group of people out there. So check them out. Once again, badass-workbench.com. Hoyt.com. Right here, this is my wife's bow, and this is the Eclipse. And this was built up for me by my buddy Caleb Brewer out at Stick Sniper Archery in Tucson, Arizona, former Army Special Forces guy. So go check out Stick Sniper Archery and, of course, check out Hoyt there. Hoyt Bow Hunting on Instagram, but Hoyt.com is the website, and this thing is awesome. So thank you guys. Hoyt, amazing. We have a archery setup here at the house. The crew from Total Archery Challenge came out and set up about 20 targets here, and it is awesome to get outside and sling some arrows as a family. So check out Total Archery Challenge as well. They're running these amazing events across the country now. So check them out, and I hope to make it to one of those again this summer. So Total Archery Challenge. Check it out. This book right here just came out in January by my buddy Matthew Thomas. It's called Interceptors, The Untold Story of the Fight Against the Cartels. So Matthew Thomas is a deputy sheriff in Arizona, and this is a book about his experience on the border. So very cool. So check this thing out. Once again, it's called Interceptors. Matthew Thomas. Bam, right there. Let's see. Let's go to a blade next. Look at this. So right there, look at that thing. Ooh. Yeah, this is awesome. So this was a gift, and it also comes right here with a training blade, and there's a place also to put your real blade while you're using your training blade. But right here, so this is Headhunter Blades, Harley Elmore, and go to headhunterblades.com. This one is called The Rat, R-A-T, right here, and just might see it in a future novel. But also, so Raphael Kanan, and that is RAFAEL_KAYANAN, and that's on Instagram. And he collaborated with Daniel Winkler to make the tomahawk that I gave my kids at my military retirement, and that is in all my novels, and that Chris Pratt used in the Terminal List series on Amazon. So he got this together right here along with Harley Elmore, and that is HARLEY_ELMORE. ELMORE on Instagram. So thank you guys so much. This blade means so much to me. And this is a nice little blade. So check that out for sure. Headhunterblades.com. And let's see. Let's go. Another weapon right here. Look at this thing. Look at this sap. So this thing might not look like much, but you do not want to get smashed in the back of the head with this thing. And look at that. That is awesome. Yeah, amazing. So this is, I'm going to spell it out, BAWIDAMANN.com. So go check them out for sure. Andrew over there makes some incredible stuff. And this was a gift, Ruin or Despair on Instagram sent this my way. So, man, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciated. And yeah, this thing is pretty serious. Just smashing it against your hand hurts. Very cool. So thank you guys. That was awesome. And they also sent this. They know me pretty well. Look at that. Can you see that? Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. So that'll be on the tree next Christmas. Thank you guys. Let's see. SIG Custom Works Concierge Service. So they have this service now, and you can go on and you can build your own pistol and customize it. So this is the one I built. It was super easy. Just jumped right on. Go to sigsauer.com and then click on that Custom Works Concierge Service, and you can drop the trigger you want in there, grips you want in there, the slide, optics. It's all right there at the Concierge Service. And so built that up. Just click, 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 and bam! It appeared at my FFL. So very cool. So SIG, thank you. And then it comes with this box right here. SIG Custom Works, and in that box, coin, Custom Works right there. 2 extra mags right here, plus the one that it comes with, and check them out. SIG Custom Works Concierge Service. Awesome. And let's see here. All right. Fortitude Coffee, Corey and Paul Russell right here. They just started a coffee company, and so took the leap, starting their own business. And so, of course, I ordered a bunch of coffee right off the bat, and go to fortitudecoffeeco.com. Check them out right here. This is the O Dark 30 right here, sourced from Colombia. Has the roast date on there, tasting notes on there, black cherry, caramel, tropical fruit. This is a dark roast right here. Once again, Fortitude Coffee, and it's fortitudecoffeeco.com. What else did I get here? Gosh, it smells good just doing this. Like, I gotta have some coffee right after this. This one's from Costa Rica right here. Citrus, almond, and honey. Nice, I like it. This is a medium roast right there. And of course, got a couple stickers and a couple mugs as well. So congratulations to Corey and to Paul, veterans both. They work with the Best Defense Foundation. You've heard me talk about the Best Defense Foundation before. My daughter and I went out to Pearl Harbor, took a group of veterans out there for the 80th anniversary commemoration events, and then went to Normandy with another group of World War II veterans this past June. So Corey and Paul play a significant role in making all that happen. So congratulations, guys, and thank you for all you do for our nation's veterans and for what you've done for the nation as well. What else? Look at this. Protect, PROEKT, right here. SPF 50 sunscreen right there. They do a bunch of supplements, and I love their hydration, their energy, their immunity. They're liquid, and just drop them into a water bottle. And so that has been keeping me hydrated as I've been writing. And right here, sunscreen. So they're doing a bunch of great stuff. My buddy Nick Norris is at the helm over there. So protect.com. Be sure and check them out. So PROTEKT.com. Check it out. And look at these things. What? Cross Tomahawks ties. Yeah, and these ones are nice ones right here. Jack Carr collection right here, or that color right there, black one right there, or this one, or one like it anyway, to the premiere of The Terminal List out in LA this past summer. So you can go to officialjackcarr.com and click on shop for the merch. So there's a bunch of stuff up there. And I think that is it. All right. Take care out there. See you next time. Thank you so much to Sig Sauer for jumping right on board out of the gate to make this podcast possible. Obviously, I am a huge Sig fan, having carried the P226 on every deployment downrange in the SEAL teams. But Sig was a supporter. They were friends well before I was a New York Times bestselling author, well before I even had an Instagram account or any social media presence whatsoever. So thank you guys all so much. Ron, Tom, Jason, everybody at SIG who gets up every day and continues to crush it and lead the way. SIG is always adapting. They're always at the forefront, whether it is firearms for citizens, whether it's firearms for our military, ammo, suppressors, optics, training, fire control units. They are doing it all, and they are always pushing that envelope and trying to do it better each and every day through innovation and adaptation. They crush. So thank you so much for that friendship and support. It will never be forgotten. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. Only the Dead, the 6th novel in my James Reese Terminal List series, hits shelves this spring. Go to officialjackcarr.com, click on Only the Dead to pre-order now. For more on Doug Patteson, follow him on Instagram at Texas Spy Dad. Follow me on the social channels at Jack Carr USA, officialjackcarr.com. That is the website. You can click on shop for the merch and sign up for the newsletter there as well. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Until the next time, take care out there. Stay safe, be strong, keep fighting.